Hey everyone, it's Desiree, and I am here with Simon Says Stamp with United We Craft, and this is a party. Grab your paper, grab your ink, grab your pens, grab whatever it is you want to do to create art, and let's enjoy. For me, I'm going to do some ink smushing. I love ink smushing. It is one of my favorite techniques, and I think it's a great stress reliever for me. I dug into my stash, and I found some previous products by Simon Says that were released. One is the Cosmo Flower Frame, and that was from their Friends release. And then I have this awesome sentiment set. Now you can see the hands are going there, and you know what? If one thing goes, everything goes. As always, computer issues. So this was live, and now we're doing a voiceover. Yay! So I will annoy everybody with my hands going across the screen against my words. This will be Gabby. Yay! But most of all, let's enjoy. So that sentiment set was from their Believe in You release, and it is called the Greeting Mix 1. So there are some great sentiments there, great fonts, different ways that they are set up, and I thought they were absolutely perfect. And if you just heard that, that was my cat. He likes to jump up on the table. So what I've done is I've already taken care of my die cuts, and I used white and black cardstock. Very simple, nothing too intricate here. I love the detail of this die. You can have a thick border, but the centers are always the same. That flower is very delicate and beautiful. For some, I cut them out into a square with the border, and I either have 2 or 3 layers, and I'm letting those edges loose so that they curl, just to add more dimension. I've stamped out some of my sentiments on either black and white cardstock, and then of course did the reverse with the embossing, and I did use my Brutus Monroe Alabaster or Raven Fine Detail. I've put down here my craft mat. That's my Tonic Studios craft mat. There you go, my hands. This is going to be absolutely hysterical. I will try not to laugh myself. But again, let's have fun. So, I like to use the craft mats, the silicone craft mats, because when I ink smush, I like the splatter look. I also love to use my oxides because they can layer on top of each other. Key is dry between each layer. You will hear me say that 10 million times in this video, I'm sure. You can also use a piece of glass. Now, I do have the Tim Holtz glass mat, but the reflection just drives me crazy. But again, if you don't have that, if you have a piece of glass, this will work just as well. I'm going to show you the differences of both items to use, the glass or the craft mat. And I'm also going to show you, if you only have the craft mat, how you can get the effect what the glass does. The craft mat or the glass will not give you what the craft mat can give you. Okay, and you'll see that. So we're going to start with the craft mat. Now, I have chosen some very different mixtures with my Distress Oxide. So the first one that's up is Pumice Stone, Hickory Smoke, and Black Soot. Now, you can look, when you ink smush, you can look to have a light, a medium, and a dark. That's usually which way that I'll go. But a lot of times, I just look to have these different layers. And I will say I have chosen some really different combinations. Now, I did choose a very common one, too, where yellow, orange, and red. So, the first layer I put down was the Pumice Stone. Now, again, since when I did this, I just turned on the camera, which I thought was great. And I was just talking, so there's going to be some weird areas going in here. So I'm very sorry. But I want you to see everything. So the next color is Hickory Smoke. So you can see this is what the craft mat, this silicone, now this is the Tonic Studios. This is what these craft mats will do. They give you, see those speckles They're like freckles going on here. Sometimes you'll get, you know, that smooth look depending upon how much water you have, how big that droplet is, how much pressure you put down with your hand. They're all factors. Do you need to really be focused on them? Absolutely not. You can just have, yes, my cat's just having way too much fun up here. Sorry about that. So you can see by those speckles coming in where there was a bigger droplet of water, it looks more watercolorish. But I love those speckles because to me that adds dimension. It adds a texture to your cardstock. Now the cardstock that I'm using here is Bristol. I did put some black soot down. Now I could have done some ink smooshing with that as well. My fear was it was going to take over. There was going to be way too much. So I chose to just do some splatters with the black soot and also some water. By adding clear water to those droplets, it kind of mixes together and creates other images, you know, ink blendings that's going on there. So after each panel, I will set that aside to dry. The heat gun that I'm using is the Ranger heat gun to dry my pieces. So here's a really different one. This one here is Tattered Rose, Aged Mahogany, and Peeled Paint. So very different here. Now, again, here's the key. Dry between each layer. See, there we go. I said it again. Told you I would. Because if you don't, you will get what I call, and what a lot of people call too, mud. These colors, when they mix, will get a brown. Okay, they won't hold. You know, the Tattered Rose is a very, very pale antique pink. Aged Mahogany is the darker shade, and then Peeled Paint is a green. So if you don't dry in between your layers, you're not going to get that effect that you're looking for. So always dry, and I always will usually, I'm going to say 9.5 out of 10. I always put my lightest color down first. I want that to be the background. I don't go with the darkest color first, or even the medium. I do like to put the lightest because that kind of sets the base for me. So the next color I'm going to come in with is the Peeled Paint. Now, it's a strong color, so I am going to add some water. Okay, my hands are just hysterical in there. That is probably absolutely annoying. So I've added some water, and you can see how it beads. And there you go. There are those speckles where the droplet is larger. And as you keep pushing down into it, the droplets will get larger of the water. They gather together. So you will have less speckled, more of a watercolor droplet. I go straight down and I come up. And you can see when I'm doing this, it's literally my fingertips are on top of that piece of cardstock that I'm pushing down into it. It's not my whole hand, or it's my fingertips, you know, that are laying flat. You'll see in other ways how I do use the glass and how I react to that differently. Now you can see I chose to just put the Aged Mahogany down, and I added a lot of water to this. Again, the less water you add, the stronger color the pigment will be. In this case, the Distress Oxides. So I only wanted it light. Now I pulled that board in because if I just set my panel down there and I use my heat gun, my mat underneath isn't going to warp. So with the wood, it'll just be, you know, fine. The wood won't warp to use that. So that's why you'll see me put that in once in a while. So here comes the glass. Now, again, I do have the Tim Holtz glass mat. It is a wonderful product, but this is just a cutting board, actually, that I got, I believe, from Amazon. So, and it's a smaller piece. But you can see, when I put the oxides down on there and add water, remember, the oxides are dye and a pigment. They will separate, but they also don't speckle. They don't bead up like they do on the craft mat. So this is what you're going to get. Now, this panel, I'm actually going to save. I think this is going to go in another video because when I saw this, Sandy Allnack inspired me because I remember she did this with watercolors and then she drew on it. So I continue with this. You'll see it. But she was very much automatically thought of her when we did this. But you can see the glass, when it's on the glass, it doesn't bead up. When you push it down, you get some harsh lines, but not many. Okay, in the center, it's very fluid looking, like a watercolor background that we would create. I'm going to add more water, as my hand, went all over that. Oh my goodness, this is, wow. So by adding that water, you can see, and I'm going to zoom in here, see how it's separating? It's almost like there's cells in there and that they're just moving apart. So that dye and ink, the dye and the pigment are pushing against each other because of the water. So interesting effect. I'm still going to go straight up and down. By wiggling the paper, that's helping me to flatten it out. You can see, because the way I held my hand when I normally do my ink smushing, that's the pattern that I'm getting. Because I'm not putting my hand completely down. So you can see the two differences. With the glass, it's more fluid looking. With the craft mat, it's more speckled. I do lean towards the speckled look rather than this, but this is kind of cool. Usually when I did the glass, I'll be honest with you, this is the first time I'm seeing this, which is really cool because usually I use inks. I use dye inks when I'm doing my ink smushing. And whenever I've recently done it with the oxides, I always use the matte. I never went to the glass. So I didn't realize, I'm sure somebody else has done this, that they separate the way they do on this piece of glass. So this is really interesting. I'm going to dry this. Now you can see when I put that down onto the glass mat, my whole hand was down onto the cardstock. Again, I'm using all Bristol when it comes to my ink smushing. Allergies. Just saying. But I still need to make sure that each layer is dried in between. Because even though it's more fluid, I still want to see each of the layers. So for the carved pumpkin, I went in a straight line. So I'm using squeezed lemonade, carved pumpkin, and candied apple. But look at those cells, if you saw those, how they came out. So again, not putting any pressure. I'm not getting much of that ink up. All right? That's all I wanted to do with the carved pumpkin because it is such a strong color. Here's the candied apple. Now, candied apple it's not as bright of a red, but what's going to happen is when the orange and the red get together, they're going to create like a coral color, and you can see that here. So see how fluid that looks. All right, it's not as defined when I used the craft mat. The next order of colors that I'm using here, I went with brown shades. So I've got antique linen and frayed burlap. Again, doing the same thing. The more water you add, the lighter the color will be, the more fluid it will look. You can see I'm trying to specifically place the colors onto the glass mat so that I can get those differences. Again, not many hard edges when you're using a flat surface. Now you can use a piece of glass, you can use a dish as long as it's flat. Just as long as it's not that silicone where water will bead up on it. That's how you'll get these techniques. So again, you get some hard edges, but you're not getting a lot of them. Also know all of the colors and the color combinations that I'm using will be on my blog. So make sure you go there so that you can see all of these colors that I am using. I think this combination turns out to be my favorite of them all, and it's very different. So for this, it's going to be, I started out with old paper. I don't understand that name, but you know what? I went with it. I loved the shade of the old paper. And then I go into Stormy Sky, and then I'm going to go into Forest Moss. So to me, the old paper does have a green tint. All right, so it goes very well with the Forest Moss. But to add that blue, kind of is really different. So I've got the layer down of the old paper. I'm putting down the Stormy Sky. Now, I'm going to make sure that I do this really quick. So I went down, again, by going quick, because to me this old paper has got a green tint to it. And I'm going to put this blue on top of it that kind of has a gray tint to it. I was not sure of the color creation that I would get if each layer was not dried. So again, you got to move. I wanted to go real quick, but I didn't want the blue to take over either. So again, just going boop, boop. Yeah, that's a sound effect of me pushing the paper down onto the craft mat and lifting it back up. So when it came to the green moss, now this would have just taken over. What I liked though is when I put the green moss on, I got this bright green color because of the old paper being down on the base. Remember, the first color you're going to put down, that's kind of going to change the colors as they come up. It has that ability, because remember, your distress oxides are water reactive. So there will be some slight, as you're adding that wet layer again, even though you've dried it, it will reactivate just slightly. So you will get some changes. That panel actually ends up to be one of my favorites. The colors just really dried well on top of each other. I wasn't sure about it, but once it dried, absolutely loved it. So, see, there it is. I had to come back in and show it to you. I just really did love those colors, and as it continued to dry, it got softer. So for the next one, I'm using milled lavender, broken china, and pine needles. This one I'm calling my mermaid panel. When it comes to ink smooshing, this is something that I could do all day. Just constantly make panels. I love to make these panels. I think these are just so versatile that you can, and again, this is a piece of Bristol. I use the Canson XL, and it doesn't matter if it's the smooth or the vellum brand. There's no difference to me. That could just be me. I'm sure there's a difference out there somewhere. But whichever one is on sale, that's the one that I get. I do get mine from Blick. So it's just the ones that I use. Now what I'll do is I'll just quarter that page. So that's a 9 by 12, so 4.5 by 6. But I can cut these down. I can make them strips. I can do all of these different things. And then I just have fun with them. So let's go back to what we're doing here. I did not dry the yellow on the craft mat. So again, remember I was saying dry, dry, dry between each levels. That's to keep the speckled look. You see what you can get now if you don't dry in between the layers. I put the yellow down, I went down into it. I put the orange, the carved pumpkin, I went down into it. I did not dry in between. This is still very wet, so I am going to come in on one side. You can see I'm not using my fingertips. I use the entire side of my hand to push down. To get that darker, I'm just going back into that ink. This looks like a watercolor panel. So again, you can get the same effect from your craft mat that you would a piece of glass or a glass mat. You just don't dry in between, and you use lots of water. You cannot get the effect from the craft mat when we dry in between to get the speckled look on the glass. That will not go back and forth. Here I'm just trying to line up. Of course I was up too high. but that's okay. So I just put 3 stripes across using what I call my mermaid color. So you can see you've got these definite lines going on. You can come in with a wet brush. You can see I did that. That probably would have been better if I went straight across. I'm not crazy about those lines, so now I'm just going to come in and just douse it with water. I can turn it into a watercolor panel that way as well. And you can also do that with inks too. So no, you can watercolor with your dye inks as well, as long as they're water reactive. Yeah, this was dripping all over the place. So those are all the different backgrounds that we created. Now, since they're dry, we are now going to, I put my card bases together, and here they are. Okay, so you can see, remember, I took care of my sentiments and my die cutting before we got started. I really wanted to focus in on the technique and how I ink smush, what the 2 differences look like between a glass and a craft mat. Of course, the one I forgot to put my sentiment on. Oops. But you can see for some of the circles that were sentiments, I put those in the center of my flowers. For some of the whites, I used my Nuvo drops because I didn't poke out those little tiny holes that came from the center. I just added Nuvo. It was like it was embossed, so that added texture. So again, my hands are going to fly over this. I am just so sorry. You name the issue, we had it, but we keep going. So these are not on card bases, okay? As you can see, this is just the panels that I've created. Usually, and I guess I got this from doing shakers, I always put a backer on top of each of them. This is how they would sit stored on a shelf or something, because what I'll do is I will just create my card bases if I need a card sometimes, especially when I'm doing a mass production like this. Yes, 7 cards are mass production for me. But when you're making a lot, these are just cards that you can grab. Now, I am also not one to put something in the center, okay, of a standard A2 size card base. For some reason, I like it to be towards the top or toward the bottom. But then you do have that space below where you can write your message on that. You can still put it on a card base, but maybe I want it on a 5x7. Maybe I want it on a 6x6. Maybe for those smaller ones, I want them on a 5x5. By doing this, you have choices to mount them, because maybe you want this big border from your card base to come around. Maybe you want to create a background on your card base for these to set on. So pretty much what you're creating here are focal points for your cards with sentiments. So again, everything is just the way you would want it to be. Here, that one right there, that is absolutely my favorite color. I am absolutely in love with the way the old paper, the stormy sky, and the forest moss melded together for those colors. It's like a beach color thing. But again, these are just ready. So whether you make cards or focal points, you know, here's what you've created. So look at all of those ideas that you can come up with. Do make something that you create, mass produce it, and then hold it off and decide how you want to put it into play or put it into a gift for somebody. It is your choice. You get to control. But I do hope that you will grab some of your craft items, grab your inks, grab your pens, grab your paper, and by all means, get together and create. And enjoy this process. Give yourself this time, whether it's a room or whether it's a small cart that's sitting in your living room. Create something. It will make you smile. It will make you happy. And by doing this, you're able to make somebody else happy if it's a gift for them. I do hope you enjoyed the project that we made. I hope you got some tips and some tips and tricks and anything else you wanted to know more about ink smushing. I have done a video on this, and I'll make sure that it is linked below so that you can check that out. All the products that I used will be linked down below as well if you wanted to check them out. But please use what's in your stash, okay? And enjoy. All right? Yes, it's really late. There's not enough coffee right now. But everyone, please make sure you're staying safe. That is most important during this time. So getting into your craft rooms or your craft space is just going to do that. It's going to keep you inside and make it a family event. I tried to get my husband involved. Yeah, he didn't want to do it. I'll get him. Absolutely. If you haven't already, I'd love for you to subscribe. Make sure you ring the bell so you know when the video is next and ready for you to watch. Also hit the thumbs up. Remember everyone, enjoy this process. This will help you just set aside what's going on in the world and at the same time keep you safe and healthy. Take care everyone, but always remember what's most important. Always be creative.